Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Thanks for fitting us into your morning. If you're still on, AM time of the day, if you're Eastern time or beyond, good afternoon to you. So good to have you with us here on the program. This is the show where we try and take a different look, a fresh look, hopefully a positive, healing, uplifting, inspiring look. And when we say all of that, and then we say we're going to take a closer look at suicide today, you might be thinking, well, how in the world can that happen? So, Debbie, we're going to go deep with our listeners today. It's a deep topic, but you know what? With all that we have going on around us, I don't think there's a person in the world, maybe, certainly among our listeners, Debbie, who hasn't been touched in some way by a suicide. I have been personally in my life. Perhaps you have. I don't know, Debbie, but this is a conversation we have to have, because I think this is not going to get better, but I think it's going to get worse as we go forward.
Well, I agree with you, Jerry. I think the conversation that we're having is a healing one, a helpful one, a useful one. But we need to hear from you. I mean, what are your takes on this? It's a place for us to really talk about it in a safe place. So we're going to ask you to dial in and share your experience, your take on it at 1-800-585-9396. And yes, Jerry, unfortunately, I have a large circle of family and friends, an extended family, and also being over 25 years in catechetical ministry. I've had numerous experiences with people that have taken their own life, and also people that have attempted to take their own life. And it's there's no way to describe it. The feelings for those of us who are left standing are just a gamut of emotions, unanswered questions, regrets, guilt, all sorts of things. And so it's a topic that is so deep, it's so beyond even emotion and words, that I personally do believe it's good that we talk about it, because then it'll give us a heightened awareness, especially if somebody is showing signs that they are really in despair. Maybe there's, something, that can be done to prevent it. Who knows unless we really talk about it. And that's the thing, is I think that when you have the word suicide, so many people, it's such a shock and in real deep disbelief that nobody really knows what to say or what to do or how to even comfort somebody who's grieving. And it's a conversation that needs to really be in homes and really discussed, I believe, because you don't want it to have something sprung on you, and then to live with all the regret of it. So that's why I was eager to tackle this show, although I have to tell you, it brings up a lot of past emotions, and I'm sure we're going to share that. So, dear listeners, if you want to weigh in on it, please call in at 1-800-585-9396.
Just a couple of things. We're not going to attempt to look at this from every possible theological angle. If you know someone who has taken his or her own life, or you've been on suicide's doorstep yourself, we'd love to hear from you, and we want to try and help maybe bring some peace into your life. But Debbie and I are not counselors either. We're people who care. I had an uncle who committed suicide. I have been in such a place of darkness before that I can, at the very least, relate to people who say, I just don't want to get up another day. And a very dear friend of mine, he and his wife, their 20-year-old son, jumped off a bridge a few months ago. So, folks, we're having this conversation because it's there, it's happening, and we can't look the other way, because the more we look the other way, the more it is going to happen. So help us with this, with your takes, all right? Have you been touched by this? Have you maybe helped somebody, avoid taking their own life by a gesture of love or charity? Please, your takes could make a huge difference. You could save a life today, perhaps. 1-800-585-9396. 800-585-9396.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Jerry, because you and I have heard for years, and maybe our listeners haven't heard this, but there have been people that were contemplating suicide and saw a Catholic radio bumper sticker and tuned in, and the Lord spoke to that person and they decided not to take their own life. We've heard stories like this. We know who those people are, and that's, a beautiful saving thing that happened to them, and how fortunate they were that at the right time in the right place they turned on the radio and God spoke to them. But like it was just shared with us, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. for all ages. So it's a real issue. It's a real problem. I really believe there's a stigma attached around it, because when somebody is really in despair, they may or may not have an underlying chemical or mental illness. They may be just really, really feeling completely alone and in terrible pain. Or there may be an underlying, mental disorder or mental illness or chemical illness. And that's a whole nother issue that we really need to really be aware of, because me personally, Jerry, I don't think in the United States we do a very good job at dealing with mental illness. And I think we really don't know sometimes how to deal with it. We kind of cast it off. And, I think it's very unfortunate, because it's no different than any other illness, physical illness, any other illness that we could encounter, in the sense that it deserves attention and treatment, and it really does deserve dignity without the stigma attached to it. And I think that's a whole nother thing as Catholic Christians we should be aware of, that we really need to, extend that loving kindness to others who are dealing with issues. So I'd love for that, for our listeners to weigh in on that as well at 1-800-585-9396.
Debbie, you used the word that I think is the issue. It's what's at issue here: stigma. There is a stigma around mental illness, and what I'm about to say, I don't say casually or flippantly. I believe everyone walking the face of the earth is dealing with some degree of mental illness. Now, here's what I mean. We are born into this world, and we are born into imperfect families. We have concupiscence. We have sin. So you combine all of that. Parents aren't perfect. They make mistakes, bad decisions, what have you. We make bad choices. It's going to affect us psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and in so many other ways. So when I say that, I don't say, we've got a world full of, crazies or lunatics running around. What I mean is, everybody, to some degree or another, has, we're not completely whole in these areas, unless you were, the second person of the Trinity taking on flesh, or the Blessed Virgin Mary for that matter. But so this is something, it's a conversation that we have to have. And just real quickly before we go to the break, Debbie, we've got to, a couple of things, I think. We need to make very clear, first of all, what the church teaches about this. And secondly, how the church has, the pastoral approach to this is, I guess you could say, evolving a little bit as mental illness becomes a little bit better understood. But the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Debbie, is unwaveringly clear that, the taking of one's own life is basically self-murder. It is a grave sin, at least objectively speaking.
But it goes on to say, the different paragraphs of the Catechism, and I hope we do cover that, because I think it's vitally important. I used to tell all of my attendees in my adult formation classes, you really must have a Catechism of the Catholic Church handy and available and ready in your home next to your Bible. It's super important to get clarification before you go out into the world and think, well, this is what the church teaches, this is what I learned, in grade school or whatever. The Catechism should be right there. Now you can go online and also Google it in, and you'll be able to find out what the Catechism says, the different paragraphs. But I hope we explore that a little deeper, Jerry, because I think it would bring a lot of comfort and a lot of understanding to how the Catholic Church views suicide and how we are to respond to suicide. And that is equally important in the sense of the whole grieving process. It's when suicide happens, it affects so many people, not just the person that committed that act. It affects all the ones living around them. And so it's important we get that comprehensive look on it. 1-800-585-9396. Jerry mentioned we're going to go to a break. Phone lines are almost completely filled up. I think we're going to have a lot of takes on this. But as Jerry said, we do need to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to explore more and have a deeper conversation about suicide. So you hear that music, stay with us. This is Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We're discussing really taking a closer look at suicide and what it means for all of us, and how we should view it, and how we should look at it, and how we should respond. So stay with us on Take Two. We'll be right back.
"60 Seconds" with Father Mitch Pacwa.
The focus of the Eucharist needs to be Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity present on that altar and being given to the people to receive into their minds, their hearts, their very bodies. And when Jesus is the center, He will form us into a proper community that you don't have to do because you feel good about each other. Because one of the great things about Christ is that He can form a community when you don't feel good about each other. Matter of fact, when you feel kind of rotten about the other people, He can still form into community. And if you don't believe me, read what the apostles were like when He's trying to form them into a community. This means that the parish is a community properly suited for the celebrating of the Eucharist.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
Hello, this is Bill Donahue from the Catholic League, and you're listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
And we thank you for listening to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. And our topic today, we're taking a closer look at suicide. Again, we absolutely hold to and understand the Church's teaching that the taking of one's own life really is a violation of the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." And it is basically the taking, the murdering of oneself in a sense. Okay, so we have to understand that. However, and not downplaying that at all, but I think so many of us today have had a close, intimate connection to someone who has perhaps taken his or her own life, or maybe you've even thought about it yourself. Debbie, I've often said, and we'll get to the calls here in just a second, I used to say that, I can't imagine someone in possession, full possession of his or her faculties doing such a thing. Now, with the advance of physician-assisted suicide, for example, I think it's maybe getting to the point where some people, maybe close to that place where they're still in full possession of their faculties. They just simply say, you know what, I just don't want to live in pain. Okay. But as far as those who are in anguish or mental torment and just simply say, I've got to get out of this, I've always tried to believe that there have to be circumstances that God is going to take into consideration and look gently upon.
Yeah, I just want to share something, Jerry, because when you were talking, I couldn't help but think over 25 years ago, my former husband and I, when we were married, obviously, we had a colleague that we worked with, beautiful, beautiful family. He was just amazing father, an amazing husband, very successful, beautiful family. And he definitely struggled with depression, and he had a chemical imbalance issue that the doctors were trying to work on. And he was kind of taking time for different retreats and stuff like that to really try to, center himself and kind of come back into life and, fully engage with his family and his work. And he quite frequently on a daily basis would call my husband and I just for kind of that lifeline. And he would call up and he would just say, hey, it's me. I'm just, wanted to chat with you. And, we felt like he was getting better, and we really felt like he had, a chance to really re-engage. And I remember vividly, my children were home, and I was busy mom running around. My ex-husband was running around. We were just running. And the phone call came in, and it was him. And he said, hi, he asked for my husband. He said, is he there? Can I talk to him? And I said, I'm so sorry. I said, he's super busy. Can he call you back? And he said, sure. And, I told him, of course, I love you. Take care. And, I hung up the phone, and we found out the next day that he had hung himself. And and I will tell you, for years, I struggled with the guilt because I kept saying, why didn't I just take the time to hand that phone over one more time? Why didn't I stop everything, stop the crazy life, and just, but it was becoming such a regular phone call that I really didn't, really feel there was an emergency, and I really didn't. And I struggled for years and prayed for forgiveness that I didn't take that time to hand that phone over, because maybe that one more call with my ex-husband, it would have maybe kept him alive longer. But I remember the thing that really struck me as so odd. His wife at his funeral said to us, "We all did everything we could do. We were all there. We gave him all the love and the attention and the medical treatment and everything we could do. He just couldn't deal with it, and he just couldn't handle things anymore." And I tell you, it still breaks my heart, but I hope in some way it brings comfort to those that could possibly feel the same way when you think you could have done more, or you should have been there, because we don't know what anybody's feeling, and it's a difficult thing. And that's why I think the word suicide always makes people go, "Oh, I don't want to touch that topic." But I wanted to share that because it was something that I had gone through, and I had to learn. I had to grow from it. I really had to get a better grip on what exactly happens when somebody is contemplating or does attempt or is successful at suicide. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix of the conversation. And I know the phone lines are completely full, Jerry, so I'm going to throw it back to you, and you can take us away.
All right, the number is 1-800-585-9396. With your help, listeners, we're trying to take a closer look at suicide, and we are going to go to, it looks like, let me see, Pamela is first in New Iberia, Louisiana, listening on Christ Our King Radio FM 90.5. Hello, Pamela. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you?
Doing all right, Pamela. How are you on this day?
I just wanted to, give my take on mental illness and, loved ones wanting to end their life. And I had to deal with it, several times. And I would always explain to people about depression. I'd say, what if this mentally ill person that is such a burden had cancer, terminally ill cancer? Everyone would be running to them to help. But mental illness is such a secret, and it's like nobody wants to talk about it. But it was so real in my family, and it still goes on. And whenever I have to talk with a loved one about, them in their mental illness, I encourage them to get help, medicine. I'll go with them to the doctor. I'll take them to, retreat. I'll assist them in what they need to help. And I always tell them that if they were not here, they would be such a loss to me. And that always makes them, listen and know that there is forgiveness. And they just want to get out of the pain that they're in. They can't take the pain anymore. And confession, reconciliation, knowing God's mercy is one of the biggest things that's helped. And that's about all I have an opinion on. And
all right, Pamela, thank you for calling.
Mm-hmm.
I think right at the end of what you were saying is what I really would like to comment on briefly, and that is, people who are going through deep depression often, first of all, it can be invisible, because I mentioned the stigma. Debbie mentioned it before. There's this stigma that if people know you're depressed, then you're weird, and it's like, oh man, kind of like the leper, I want to stay away from that person. And a lot of people, won't reveal what they're going through because they think it's a weakness. They think something's wrong with me that's not wrong with anybody else. And really, that is not the case. But really, Debbie, I think the core thing that Pamela said was people just want to get out of the pain. And I just really know that when that pain, that mental torment gets so bad, it has to reach a point, Debbie, it has to reach a point where somebody says, you know what, I don't care what the church teaches. I don't care what happens to my soul. I just can't take this anymore. That's got to be an awful place to be. But Debbie, I have to believe people actually reach that point.
Right. And what Pamela said, she reiterated how we started the show, the introduction, and I think it was really helpful, Pamela, because it does shed light on how we all need to become aware of. I appreciate how you related, mental illness with like cancer or any other illness that you're struggling with. When cancer hits, everybody rallies around. When mental illness is uncovered, everybody kind of, like you said, stays away, backs off, rejects. And the only reason I say that from my own personal life experience is because when I was referring back to this colleague that had committed suicide, when he revealed to the other people in our agency that we worked in, when he revealed he had a chemical imbalance, he lost almost all of his friends immediately, every one of them. In fact, we were his only friends that stayed with him because we knew his heart. We knew how great he was, and we loved his family. We loved everything about him. But he lost all of his colleagues. Nobody checked on him. They kind of just rejected him, like, oh, well, he lost his whatever.
Like a leper.
Like a leper. And it really, and I think, believe it or not, I think at the core of it, I'm just speculating now, but I think that had everybody at work embraced him and held him up and supported him and showed him tremendous love and unconditional support, I believe in my heart of hearts, he would have had a better shot at not feeling so alone. I think, we do a real disservice when somebody says, I'm clinically depressed or severely depressed, or I have suicidal thoughts, or I have a mental illness or a chemical imbalance. If we reject them, I think that is it's pushing them down that tunnel that much quicker. And that's just my take on it, Jerry. I just had to share that.
Yeah, Pamela, thank you. Thank you for calling the show and getting our phone call segment started. As Debbie said earlier, we have very, very full phone lines. Don't want to bring any of you on the show right now because in about 2 minutes we have our dreaded hard break where we have no choice but to be out at 27 past the hour. So Deacon Gary and Tony and Patrick and Patty, please, all of you stay on the line. We're going to get to every one of you. We're taking a closer look at suicide here on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, and our phone number is 1-800-585-9396. And as we're talking, Debbie, I'm reminded as we get set to go into the break that depression and tragically suicide, they do not discriminate. And I have been shaken to the core of my being several times in the last few years to learn of priests who have committed suicide. Mm-hmm. Now, when we hear something like that, we think, wait a minute. We always think, he's a priest. He's close to God. He prays. He doesn't have these kinds of. He's there to help those of us who have these kinds of problems. You know what I mean, Debbie? It's like,
yeah.
If a doctor gets sick and dies of cancer, you kind of scratch your head and go, hey, there's something wrong with that picture. And I don't know if you've heard of priests who've committed suicide, Debbie, but it doesn't discriminate. It really doesn't. It's something that could afflict anybody. We have to be aware of that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. The thing that always resonates with me, Jerry, and in the years of catechetical ministry, when I had to be there at families' houses when people have committed, when a family member had committed suicide, and I was called to help with the youth and try to help, just be there to console and to help in the grieving process. One of the things that constantly used to come up is the word, they felt alone. They felt completely alone. They felt like they couldn't handle the pain anymore, and they felt like no one else understood it. And I think if there's anything we can create awareness is that, we don't want people to feel alone. We're all connected. We're all the body of Christ. We're all connected. And I just feel like that breaks my heart that somebody would feel that alone and that much in pain, that in that much despair, that they would be willing to take their own life to free themselves of it. So this is there's that music, and that's the one immovable break that we have to take. And so when we come back, we'll dive deeper into the subject of suicide. So stay with us on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We'll be right back.
EWTN is now on Twitter. Get short, timely messages from EWTN on your computer or cell phone. It's easy to stay up to date on a wide variety of topics. Pro-life news, Vatican announcements, catechesis, apologetics, the latest EWTN programming, and more. You can link to EWTN on Twitter from our homepage or go to twitter.com/EWTN. At work, at home, at school, and on the road. Stay connected to your world with EWTN's Twitter page.
60 Seconds with Mother Angelica.
It's like the brides, 10 were very, very fervent, and they had oil in their lamp, and they had extra oil. Well, here were 10 that didn't. They had oil in their lamps, but no extra oil. Here the bridegroom is coming, and those who had just the oil in their lamp all went out. And they said, "Give me some of your oil." And they said, "Hey, we can't, lest we too run out." Now, the first thought in your mind is, they're uncharitable. Why didn't they share, right? I know what you're thinking. I thought the same thing. But see, when we die, my friends, when the bridegroom calls you and me, there's no more time to get oil. You've had 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. You got to repent. You got to go ahead of time and put oil in that lamp.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
This is Patrick Coffin. Join me for Catholic Answers Live. It's 2 hours dedicated to Catholic apologetics and evangelization. Designed for Catholics and non-Catholics alike, it's your opportunity to hear from and talk with some of the leading apologists and theologians in the church today. You've got questions? We've got Catholic answers. Catholic Answers Live, weekdays 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on EWTN. You want to know how real this topic is? We have our EWTN Catholic Radio Facebook page, and there is a gentleman. Let's all pray for him right now. His name is Randall. I'm not going to say a last name, Randall. I don't know. There's a very brief message posted on Facebook. It simply says, "No, but I may lose myself to suicide." And we have already arranged to have an EWTN priest reach out to Randall. So, again, don't know if that's some sort of veiled comment that he's going through this right now. But, folks, it's real. I mean, there's a face on this, and it's people you know, and it's people you love. And we're going to hear more of your takes without delay right now. Patrick in Blooming Prairie, Minnesota, listening on Sirius XM 130. Welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Patrick, how are you?
Hi, yeah, thanks for the call. We live in kind of a soundbite, world where things come fast, and so you got to think fast on your feet. And I love acronyms. Acronyms can include so much information in just a short little thing. And what I've come up with is SSB. And you can say sub, SSB. And what it stands for is what I learned in chaplaincy, is that there are three most basic needs for humans. They have to feel significant, they have to feel safe, and they have to feel like they belong. Significant, safe, belong. SSB. Now, when we're trying to think fast on our feet, and we're coming in contact with others, if you look at a person and picture them like a sub sandwich, SSB, sub, and remember that when you want to bend something, especially metal, it has to be warmed up first. So, when I look at people and trying to be charitable, trying to be Christ with skin on for them, I think of them as a bent sub sandwich. I get right to the core of everyone's need. I ask them, do you feel significant? Do you feel safe? And do you feel like you belong? And to me, that can help us when we're feeling like you've mentioned, that the one man, as soon as he mentioned that he had a chemical imbalance, people just walk away. And I think the reason is because they don't know how to handle it. But that, to me, is a useful tool. If you can look at them, SSB, and for me, I make a picture of a bent sub sandwich, meaning I have to warm them up first, know that they're welcome, their thoughts, their sharing is welcome, and that warms them up, and then focus on those basic needs. And so that makes us capable of being God with skin on. We can be actual God in the flesh for them. I also have personal stories where I didn't have a God with skin on, but I cried out to God, our spiritual God, and I no longer felt alone. So he kind of just in that grace gave me the significance, feeling safe, and feeling that I belonged in his family, in God's family.
Patrick, let me comment on some of this stuff. This is excellent stuff. Debbie and I are looking at each other just saying, wow, this is good. And thank you for sharing all of this. I think those three things, Debbie, really get at the heart of why a lot of people would feel, I guess, if I can put it this way, the need, I'm using air quotes here, the need to end their lives. The whole significance thing, what it gets down to, Debbie, in many cases is self-dignity, self-worth. People are walking around with so much shame and guilt and really self-hatred, quite honestly. In fact, you don't kill something you love. So if there's a suicide or an attempted suicide, there is some degree either of self-hatred or a greatly diminished proper self-love. So there's that significance that Patrick's talking about. Safe. How many times is depression linked to anxiety? Well, anxiety is exactly the fact that you go out into the world and the world is this big bad bully that you have all this anxiety like it's just going to overrun you and you can't handle reality. So there's that safe element that he's talking about. And Debbie, you said so many people feel alone. They don't feel that they belong. So I think Patrick's nailed three things right here.
I agree. I'm so glad, Patrick, you took the time to share with us and converse with us and educate us, because it really is helpful. I made notes on exactly what you said about the sub and significant, safe, and belong. You know, I've often said that we can really love people into a fruitful life. We can really love people. The worst thing we can do is distance ourselves from each other. And we see that a lot in families, in friendships. I mean, it's really quite sad. We're a throwaway society in general. And when things get old or tarnished or damaged, we throw it away and buy a new one. That's the majority. That's the kind of mindset we have in this day and age. Not for everybody, probably present company and callers excluded. However, it's important for us to not distance ourselves, because you know, the thing about suicide is, like we said earlier at the beginning of the show, it affects terribly and deeply the ones that are still standing, the ones that are still around and still alive. So this is a problem for all of us to deal with and not to distance ourselves from it. And I think it's helpful that we're having this conversation. I'm glad Patrick shared and really got us down. I hope all our listeners took notes on that, on his comments as well. Okay, we're going to move. Are we moving on, or do we have to take another break? Yeah, we're going to go
to Deacon Gary. Deacon Gary in Denver, Colorado. Thanks, Deacon, for calling Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, and thanks for waiting. All of you, thanks for your patience on the line. Deacon, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Deacon Gary. Thank you so much for the program. And the thing that I wanted to say was that I think this is a simple but clear way that the message of the church and the message of Jesus can be addresses this issue, is on the spiritual level, but I mean in the terms of, in the practical spirituality of like Ignatius of Loyola, in which we, instead of saying, I'm having suicidal thoughts, we have all the things you're talking about psychologically, we can have those thoughts, but sometimes those thoughts are not ours. And so for us to just carte blanche say, I'm having suicidal thoughts or I'm depressed, It may be that we're weighed down. In other words, we're fighting a spiritual battle. And so the teaching of the church then can be profoundly clear on that. Any spirit of depression or suicide is then clearly from the devil, and we can condemn this. This is satanic. This is a contrary spirit. And then our job is to oppose it with all our might. And then it's not us having suicidal thoughts, it's us battling with a depressive spirit. And sometimes the charismatic movement will deal with this in a beautiful way. And sometimes the charismatic movement is considered kind of superficial because they're into these kinds of healings and the doing away with suffering. But if you look at the Gospels, it's just so striking how Jesus constantly, every time he's doing something, he's casting out demons. And so that has to be a part of the work of the church. And to get this into the Catholic mindset, even the sophisticated Catholic mindset, that the first thing we have to do is say, hey, wait, is this my suicidal thought or is this a suicidal thought? Is this a spirit of suicide which is attacking me? And then what am I going to do to battle it? And then it's not on us anymore. And then we're more able, I think, to reach out for help, for prayers, because it's not a shameful thought. We're in the battle. We're in the battle, and this spirit is attacking us, and we can then more readily or, without shame, ask for help in the battle. No football
Deacon.
team wins the game by themselves. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah, you probably introduced something into the conversation that is very, very important that we were not unaware of, but we probably maybe should have introduced that as well. It's just the whole spiritual element of this. I think what you're saying, Deacon, is absolutely at its core ultimately true. What would Satan want more than anything than to have someone, one of God's children, take his or her own life, given especially the grave objective nature of that act, objective nature. So, yes, there's no question, but there's that element. I think maybe that element is maybe it intensifies the psychological problem. Maybe it intensifies the biochemical issues, because I know, and Debbie, you're much more versed on these bodily, you're a health coach and a life coach, so you probably know more about these sorts of things, but we can't, I don't know, I would be a little bit hesitant to say it's only the devil. And Deacon, I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but Debbie, I don't know, do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I totally do, and I agree wholeheartedly. Deacon, I appreciate your contribution, and I think it really does give us some more food for thought on this, and I would agree, as same with Jerry, at the core of it. The other thing, too, is I think we can safely all agree that anything that is a negative feeling or a negative emotion, like fear and stuff like that, are not of God. So if they're not of God, they're obviously, of Satan. So you can kind of talk more, I think even more general, that, any negative feeling or emotion is not of God. And then when it's not of God, then, you open yourself up to being, governed or directed or tempted, if you will, to give into that negativity. And then that, of course, is not of God. I would love to hear your comments on that, Deacon, because the only reason I say that is because I would not want people to walk away thinking that if somebody is truly feeling alone and very desperate and in a tremendous emotional pain, that in some way it was, constructed by Satan, forced by Satan, because, I've encountered people who have attempted suicide, and they are some of the most faithful, beautiful people. They were in tremendous, tremendous emotional pain, and sometimes that overruns your thoughts and your rationale. So I'm curious to see how you feel about like all negative emotions, because we know they're not of God. Deacon, do you have any comments on that?
I think that you're talking about it in exactly the right way, but the reaction, I don't know if it's the way I talk about this, but the reaction that you have, I often have from people as I try to talk with them about it. It's sort of like, yeah, but we don't want to just say this is just blame this all on Satan. It's kind of like I don't know if it feels irresponsible to people to say, well, this is all the devil. because clearly we have suffering in our lives. So we have physical and emotional and psychological suffering, and we also have physical, emotional, and psychological and intellectual needs. And in that neediness, this is what's crazy about it, in that neediness, we're blessed. So for us to, of course, but we have to talk about that. So I'm so glad that you talk about that. We are emotionally, psychologically, physically needy, and it's us. And then we have a choice in this. We can either just decide to fight, to resist the impulses and contrary spirits, and also those the disobedience that can be us. But it's to neglect the clear teaching that this is clearly from the and to go to Jesus for him to cast out the demon. When Jesus cast out those demons, which he did over and over again, those people they weren't people that didn't have any other problems, or they weren't people that were trying to be irresponsible, but they were. But to recognize that there is a spiritual battle going on here, and sometimes when I say spiritual battle, I think people are thinking, well, that's okay. That's when you have to start praying more. I guess that's when I'm having a spiritual battle. I'm not praying enough. And it's kind of like, no, you're in a spiritual battle, and you got to get help because you can't win this battle by yourself. That's the clear teaching of Jesus. So people went to Jesus to have him cast out the demons, and they should go to the church, to the people of God, to us, to cast out those demons. Then you have your own battles to fight and your own cross to carry and stuff like that. That goes along with it. But to just say, well, we're not going to pretend that, somehow, I think this is why charismatic movement gets a bad rap. It's kind of like somehow we shouldn't have a cross to carry, so we're just going to have Jesus exercise it every time we have a little trouble. It's not that. But to not admit that and say, this suicidal thought is not mine. This is not something I should own. This is something I should battle. Yeah. That seems to me a great help. At least it is in my life, in my own heart. So,
Deacon, I want to thank you for the call. Thanks for your diaconate too, for your ministry in the church. It sounds like you've got a real, deep passion and love for God's people. So we both want to thank you for that, and thank you for your call. One last quick thing before we move on to our next caller that comes to mind is, Debbie, the phrase grace builds on nature. Mm-hmm. And so, in a certain sense, in our spiritual lives, everything is grace, everything. But right. Grace depends upon, what grace builds on nature means is we have to be on the natural level disposing ourselves, striving to be more virtuous, more charitable, more prayerful, and so forth, to allow more grace to come in. So I think the flip side of that is, when it comes to suicide, yes, ultimately it's a huge victory for Satan if anyone commits suicide. So the temptation also may build upon human weaknesses and so forth. I think it kind of opens the door and allows maybe for a satanic stronghold to get in there. But we have to just realize, as the church does, that there's a real fine balance here. And really, Debbie, one of the hardest things to do for someone who's in depression and thinking of suicide is determining, okay, what exactly is the root cause of this? That could be a real challenge.
Exactly. I mean, just talking to that person may not help them. Even getting medical attention may not be, the thing that solves everything. It's a comprehensive approach, and I do think, prayer is that we definitely have to, ramp up the prayer. I really appreciate what Deacon Gary did say. His whole comments were phenomenal, but also at the end, it really struck me where he said, these thoughts, these negative thoughts and emotions are not my own. I shouldn't own them. I must battle it. I really appreciate, Deacon, what you shared, because that's very true. I recall when I went through my divorce, and deep emotional pain I was in, I kept having priests say to me, these are don't own this, don't own this, don't take it on, because it's gonna consume you, it's gonna overrun you. And so that I really appreciate his comments, and I appreciate him calling in today on Take Two. Okay, we're going to move right along to Lucy, listening on Sirius XM 130. Hi, Lucy. Welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Hi, Lucy. Lucy?
All right, well,
yes,
are you there, Lucy?
Hi, Debbie.
Hi.
Okay, good.
I explained why I was calling to the person who answered, but a shortened version is I have an uncle who is in a nursing home, and he does watch EWTN for the Mass, and he says his rosary every day. But he's talking about hanging himself. He's concerned about how he's going to die in this nursing home, and he doesn't want to spend a lot of time there, so he thinks that hanging himself is the solution. You know, him and I talked about it, and I said to him, you do remember your catechism. I said, this is considered a mortal sin. You would be murdering yourself. And he said, I don't believe that anymore. I'm concerned about. I don't think he can accomplish this in the nursing home. But if somehow he did accomplish it, what would happen to his soul? I mean, because he has Alzheimer's, he is not in his right mind. So I don't know what the
Lucy,
church
let me ask you something here, Lucy. Do you? It's obvious. It's beautiful that you. I mean, it's a blessing that you know about this, so that you actually can be aware of his thoughts in this direction. Have you talked to the nursing home about this? Put them on alert?
Yes, I have. I spoke to them a couple of weeks ago, the first time he mentioned it. And they are checking on him every 15 minutes. And they were supposed to have a psychological evaluation. They don't really talk to me too much because the guardianship, I applied for guardianship of him. And it hasn't, it hasn't taken place yet. All the paperwork is in place, but they're very guarded on what they can say to me. You know, we do discuss his medication, but for some reason they can't tell me if he's had a psych evaluation yet. So I'm going to ask them at that again. I'm there twice a week, and every week, every time I'm there, I say, what's going on, what is the doctor saying and all that, and they haven't increased his medication or anything. They just go and they check on him, they said, every 15 minutes. And
Lucy,
in good spirits.
Right. Lucy, couple things. We're kind of getting ready to run out of time for the show, and there was a couple more things we wanted to touch. But real quickly, are you able to get a priest to visit your uncle, and are you able to have that? Or can you arrange that? Because that really needs to happen like immediately.
Except that a few weeks back, they arranged to have a Catholic Mass in the nursing home, which we attended. And my uncle is 81, and he's very set in his ways. And unfortunately, he is prejudiced, and it's a terrible thing for him to be that way. Nowadays, just, we should be very accepting of everybody. That's the Christian way to be. Unfortunately, he's not like that. And it was an Afro-American priest, and my uncle said, well, I'm not going to go to Mass with him anymore because I don't really like the way he did things. So I would have to look around. He's about an hour away from where I live, so I'm not familiar with the parishes in the area. I would have to do a little research. To see if I could find somebody else that would be willing to come and visit him.
Right. Okay, well, we're going to pray for you and your uncle and pray that you can do the research and get some priests, or, even weekly have a priest visit your uncle. That's vitally important. And so I just want to make sure that you at least have that. If you want, okay, so Oh, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. If you want to go ahead and leave your number with our EWTN call screener, Matt Gabinski, maybe we could try to locate a priest in the area where your uncle's at. So, if we can be of service in that way. But please research it, and because that would comfort you as well, Lucy. You're kind of shouldering a lot of the feelings, and that's can be painful as well. Real quickly, Jerry, I know we got to close the show, but I just want to encourage all of our listeners to go to the Catechism of the Catholic Church on specifically. Oh, and Lucy, thank you so much for calling in. God bless you, and we will continue to pray. Please go to the Catechism of the Catholic Church and read paragraphs 2280 through 2283 on what the Church states about suicide, because it really is clear, and it really will help you make some sense of the grieving process and what we are to think about and pray about for those who have committed suicide, especially 2283, where it says we should not despair of the eternal salvation of persons who have taken their own lives. By ways known to Him alone, God can provide the opportunity for salutary repentance. That means a real repentance, a genuine repentance. The Church prays for persons who have taken their own lives. So the Catechism is a vital, vital source. We really, truly must take a look at the paragraphs on suicide. Go ahead, Jer.
Well, I wanted to mention early in the show, I talked about some dear, dear friends of mine whose 20-year-old son jumped off a bridge. And there was a gentleman nearby tending a garden, and he ran over there, and prior to the young man expiring, he had the Hail Mary on his lips, according to this man. So that gave great comfort to that family. But that, Debbie, that highlights exactly what you were talking about right there. And I also want to draw people's attention to, I mentioned that this has been an issue close to me. A former coworker of mine, his son, actually, he was 17 or 18, and drove the family van head-on into another car at 60 miles an hour in an attempt to commit suicide. Came away unbelievably with just a scrape on his arm. The other man was actually okay. They have since met and have teamed up now to try and help prevent teen suicide. His name is Luke Maxwell. If you go to YouCan'tBeErased.com, the letter U, YouCan'tBeErased.com. There's resources for young people, for parents. My takeaway, Debbie, is it's unspeakably tragic when someone even thinks about, let alone actually does commit suicide. As the Church says, I just want to pour my heart into believing that God will have mercy. Let us pray for that, for all people who are victims of this.
And my takeaway is, first of all, Tony and Daniel and Patty, please forgive us. Please email us or talk to the EWTN screeners, and we will be happy to keep the conversation going. My takeaway is you don't know what somebody's dealing with, so be gentle and delicate with each other. We're all part of the body of Christ. Until tomorrow, have a beautiful and blessed day.